Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Suze and your host for today is Jen Badger. Hi, Jen. Uh,
Hello.
Jen is our co-founder, MD, and overall subject expert. And we are going to be talking about pre-notification today. So, nearly 3 years after the claim notification form was introduced, it's still one of the easiest ways for a perfectly legitimate claim to be lost. And before we dive in, before we get going, for those of you who might not know us, we are WhisperClaims and we provide software and support for accountants and advisors preparing R&D tax claims in-house. We don't prepare claims, you do. And our aim is simple: to help firms prepare robust claims through a structured compliance-first focused framework backed by advice line support when needed. And one of the major ways that we try to support firms is by running sessions like this. So we're going to revisit, as I said, pre-notification rules and the claim notification form, the CNF. And as most of you will know, the requirement was introduced in April 2023. So we're coming up to 3 years since it was brought in. And while the core rules themselves are reasonably clear, the reality is that in practice, there are still areas that can catch people out, not because advisors aren't paying attention, but because the less obvious scenarios can cause difficulties. So you may feel confident that you understand the rules, the known knowns, but occasionally a situation comes along where it only becomes clear that in hindsight, a CNF was required after all. And part of the challenge that we hear about from our customers and our wider audience is that when R&D tax isn't necessarily a day-to-day service for a firm, it just may be part of a much broader portfolio, and claims only, come about occasionally. It can be hard to stay on top of the detail. And even for those of who are immersed in it 24/7 like us, we still find some of it challenging as well. So you're not alone, so don't feel like that. So ultimately, the aim of today's session is to revisit the rules, talk through some of the grey areas, and help you approach pre-notification with confidence ahead of the March deadlines. Jen's going to take you through the key points in a moment, and we'll leave time at the end for a Q&A. So do feel free to drop any questions that you have in the Q&A box. I don't think we've got any resources to share with you today, but don't worry. Either way, if you use the chat, that's absolutely fine. But I'll hand over to Jen for us to get started.
Cool. Thanks, Suze. So today we'll be covering all aspects of claim notification. So we'll talk about why we're still talking about this, based on kind of feedback we're getting from our clients and things we're observing. We'll talk about what the claim notification form is, who needs to submit it, the kind of grey areas, issues, and the consequences that we're seeing people suffering through making mistakes with the claim notification form. Before I dive in, I think Sue's going to pop up a quick poll just so we can get an idea of kind of how people, sort of the attendees' experience of this and how they're feeling about claim notification form. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes just to respond to that.
Yeah, just a quick temperature check. So
Mhm.
question being, how confident do you feel about identifying when a CNF is required? We've got very confident, fairly confident, somewhat unsure, and still unclear in some situations. So as I said, we'll just give you all just a couple of seconds just to give us your answers, and we'll see we'll see where everyone's at. Looks like we've got a bit of a tie-ish breaker between
Mhm.
fairly confident and somewhat unsure. I think it's fair to say that
Yeah.
generally feel confident with the basics, don't they, Jen? But there's still some areas where interpretation isn't always straightforward. So that feels quite reflective.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And I think definitely, I mean, obviously, if you take it together, the somewhat unsure and still unclear, we're definitely seeing more people that are unsure, which I'm not surprised about. And even obviously the fairly confident, we're not seeing people yet, even I'd say 3 years after this was introduced, we're still not seeing many people that are like, yep, I've absolutely got this in every situation. So it's really good to know that we've kind of pitched this right, and this is the kind of thing that people need to hear about. Okay, so first of all, why are we still talking about this? So as that reflects, there's still a lot of confusion and misunderstandings that we're seeing about this. So we've moved on from in the early days of this coming in, we saw a lot of people that were confused about, for example, what the difference between the CNF and the additional information form was. So whether when the needs for there was claim notification versus the need for an additional information form. So we saw that kind of thing. We saw people going to the wrong links, the wrong portals to do, and mixing the two forms up quite a lot, and just general misunderstandings about when claim notification was needed. We're now seeing that kind of confusion ebbing away, but still a lot of people not realizing that they need to claim notification. So we are still seeing quite a lot of missed claims. A lot of this is to do with, and I'll go into it in a bit more detail, the amendment rule still catching people out. And I did see someone on LinkedIn this morning saying that that's still going to be a problem until 2029, because it's about claims that started prior to 1st April 2023. Those claims won't have washed out and been 2.5 years away until 2029. So we're still going to be dealing with, is that previous claim valid for quite a long time? And a lot of this has come in the sort of delay. So obviously it was introduced in April 2023, but it was for claim periods starting on or after 1st April 2023. So no one was really having to do this until the middle of 2024. So we're still really, though it's been around for 3 years, we're really only kind of a year and a half into the proper usage of it. And because of a lot of claims that were starting prior to that period still being put through, we're just seeing a lot of that kind of delay between instruction usage and impact is still hitting us quite hard. And obviously, because it's not required for all claims, it's not yet become a kind of automatic part of the process in the way that the additional information form is now just absolutely core to how everyone does an R&D claim, because it is required for every claim and it has to be done every time. The CNF isn't that and won't ever be that. So it's a wee bit difficult to get it kind of set and get everyone's minds around to what they're doing. So just to make sure we're all using the same terminology, claim notification form, or CNF, that's what HMRC call it. And I think we need to, as a sector, agree that's what we're calling it. I have seen it referred to as the ANF, or Advanced Notification Form, or the Pre-Notification Form. I think we should all be avoiding using ANF because it's too easy to confuse that with AIF. And that's where quite a lot of confusion came in. So we'll be using CNF throughout this presentation. But very much like the AIF, it is completed and submitted through an online portal. So HMRC's has a link. It's the usual thing where there's a whole load of description, a whole load of guidance about how to use it, and then the button is at the very bottom. So again, can be confusion, and it looks almost identical to the AIF page. So again, you need to be checking what page you're on and whether you're in the right place. But basically, what they're looking for is some high-level detail of the company and its projects. HMRC say this is so they can do early intervention with claims that possibly aren't eligible, probably aren't eligible. I think it's also to help them manage their workload if they can see the number of claims that are coming through, all that kind of thing. But really, what they're looking, it's part of their whole parcel work to reduce error and fraud within the R&D tax relief scheme. So they're looking to be able to intervene early in claims where they're like, I don't think that seems eligible. So to be able to fill it out, you need the claimant company's UTR, contact details of the main R&D contact within the claimant company, contact details of yourself, so any agent, that should say agent, not against, involved in preparing the claim, the accounting period and period of account start and end dates, and then a high-level summary of the R&D activities. So that's quoting directly what that says. It's one box, so you've got one kind of text box that you can fill in with a summary. We'll talk a little bit later about how much detail is needed there. Something that did come out of the R&D communication forum yesterday was the information that if you make a mistake with either the UTR or the dates, you can, and then the HMRC are not able to line up the CNF with the actual claim when it's submitted, you can go to them as long as you can show that it was submitted and it was a genuine mistake in either the UTR or the claim dates, they will then allow the claim. So you do have a little bit of a guess at if you make a mistake in either of those two places. So how much detail is needed about the projects? So their guidance purely says a summary of high-level planned activities. So, and they continue by saying you do not need to include evidence on the claim notification form, but you'll be asked to give additional information before you claim R&D relief on your return. So obviously they're referring to AIF there. So this is something that we have been asked a lot. We are still asked a lot about how much detail HMRC are looking for. And the answer really is no one really knows yet. I would suggest a couple of paragraphs on the overall type of work that's been done. If there's only one project, you could probably give information about the project. Obviously, because of the timing of the CNF, which we'll talk about a little bit in the next slide, but obviously because it can be submitted from the very beginning of the claim period or the beginning of the accounting period, the company might not have much detail about what they have done. They'll have no information about what they've done, but they will have information about what they're planning to do. So HMRC cannot be expecting a huge amount of information about everything that was done because the company may not have that at that point. They might not have it at the end of the claim period because they've not gathered it all together even. So there's a balance to be struck between giving HMRC enough information to be able to use the CNF for useful things like checking where early intervention is needed, but not so much that you're essentially doing the AIF work up front. HMRC have spoken to some of the professional bodies about this. So the type of feedback they've had from HMRC is they have seen advisors and accountants putting the same wording across different clients for all of their CNF. So something around the company is working in software and doing blah, 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 blah. And they've been taking that, copying and pasting that. They are noticing that and they don't like it. So don't do it. You do need to produce something tailored to each client and their claim. They don't like generic one-liners like R&D was carried out, which they are seeing quite a lot of. So again, that is not an automatic rejection, but if they see it, they will reject it and ask for more information. And they did, and I think this is probably, hopefully, something they're seeing less and less of, but they are seeing people just bashing the keyboard and putting in absolute nonsense to be able to continue with the form. That is automatically rejected. So they have some checks that there is actually words within that text box, and if there isn't, they will automatically reject that. So obviously that's not hugely helpful, but what they're saying is what we can take from this is that they are noticing what's in it and they are looking at it, and there is some level of rejection of these forms. So you do need to put in some amount of information that's specific to your client and their projects. So yes, when to submit it. So it's got to be submitted within the claim notification window. So this is the period from the first day of the accounting period to 6 months after the accounting period. So you've got a year and a half to do it. Obviously, and this is something that I know the professional bodies and anyone who's given any feedback to HMRC has pointed out, that 6 months is a strange deadline for this. It's not the tax deadline at 9 months. It's not the CT600 deadline at 12 months. It's earlier than both of those. And that is a lot of the reason this can get missed, because if a company isn't ready to do any of their tax affairs, they're probably not thinking about claim notification forms either. So you need to have that in your head that this is earlier than anything else to do with R&D tax or indeed tax within the company. So you've got, as I say, first day of the accounting period to 6 months after the end. For companies where there's a longer period of account, the claim notification is the same for both accounting periods, and you only need one CNF. So if you've got an 18-month accounting period, you don't need to do a CNF for both the 12-month and the 6-month periods within that. So the window runs from the first day of the period of account to 6 months after the end of the period of account. So you actually have a much longer period within that to submit a CNF. And it does feel strange doing it because you could be going beyond the 6 months after the end of the first accounting period. So they work on period of account, not accounting periods. But generally speaking, as I say, the main thing you need to get into your head is the 6 months deadline. Now, who has to submit a claim notification form is where things get more complicated. So the most straightforward thing is if a company has never claimed R&D tax relief before. That's great. This is an issue where you've got startups. The deadline is quite often missed for the first year of their trading, so the first set of accounts, purely because, generally speaking, when you start a startup, founders are not thinking about getting an account and thinking about their accounts, submitting a claim notification form for the R&D they've done. So we are seeing a lot of first-time claimants missing that first period because they didn't know about R&D, they weren't aware of it, they didn't know they needed to do this. The other set of people that need to submit a claim notification form are where the company has claimed R&D tax relief before, but the last R&D tax relief claim was submitted more than 3 years before the end of the claim notification period. So basically, you've got 2.5 years before the end of the accounting period. If it was within that window, then you're okay. Unless the only claim they've submitted in the last 3 years leading up to the end of the claim notification period was for an accounting period starting before the 1st of April 2023 and submitted by amending the tax return. Sorry, I don't know where that on or after the 1st of April 2023. So where you've done an amendment for a claim that was started before the 1st of April 2023, then that claim won't count. So that is a problem, and that is the thing that's hitting everybody. And this is the thing that will continue to hit everybody that's trying to work this out until 2029. Obviously, once you've done another claim posts all of the April 2023 mess, that one will count and that one is fine. But we are still seeing companies now who are now missing. Maybe they submitted their a financial period ending 31st December 24. And they've only just submitted that, but they've submitted it as an amendment, and suddenly their 2025 claim is lost. So we are still seeing claims being missed because of this, and this will, as I say, continue for several years yet. The other thing that can be a problem is if the claim was rejected by HMRC and removed from the tax return, which could potentially happen outside. You could potentially have a claim that was submitted within the claim notification window, so therefore claim notification is not required. But then that claim is removed from the tax return, then suddenly the next claim would be invalid. We're not seeing that so much yet because obviously the claims that could be affected by this are still coming through in the wash. So we might see that. It's something to be aware of where your company's had an inquiry, or potentially, for example, HMRC has rejected the claim on the basis that they didn't get an AIF and it's been removed immediately from the tax return. That could affect any subsequent claims you're making. So all of this needs to be something that you're thinking about all of the time, and how to and working out whether a company needs a claim notification form in the first place. Yeah, okay. So obviously, if a claim notification form is missed, HMRC will just reject the claim. So as we've already said, many claims have been rejected over the past couple of years on the basis that they should have had a claim notification form and it was not submitted. And most of these are just your companies not realising they need to submit a CNF, especially because of that amended returns rule. So they know they've done a claim in the past. There is a very small window within which you can get away with this, because HMRC's guidance when first published was incorrect, but it's to do with the claim notification period. Claim notification should have been submitted within the 6-week period in 2023 or 4. So it doesn't really apply to any claims washing through now. So generally speaking, companies, if you don't realise it and miss it, that's it, gone. And again, claim rejections might cause this to happen in future where claims have been removed. So what we are seeing though is companies having some success pleading exceptional circumstances. So we've heard from a few clients that they've gone to HMRC and said, the director was ill, they were very busy with something, they weren't able to do this, didn't have access to it, whatever it was. When we first started talking about claim notification, we were like, no, HMRC are not being particularly sympathetic. They do seem to be being somewhat sympathetic, but I wouldn't count on it. And as I say, there's a very small window where some claims are missed. So it's worth looking at the guidance around that, a very small adjustment for a very small window. But basically, if you have missed the CNF where it was needed and you've missed a deadline, that is it. The claim is gone and there is nothing you can do. I think we're going to put up another quick poll just now so that I can have a breather.
Yes, we are. That's right. Yeah, so now Jen's gone over all the rules. We just have another question here. So really, just have any of you encountered any of the following situations relating to a claim notification form? A CNF deadline had already passed before you realised one was required. A previous claim was rejected after the deadline for the next CNF had passed. You took on a new client and discovered the CNF deadline had already been missed. That's one we've heard of. Or maybe you were unsure whether a CNF was required in a particular scenario. Let us know. Let us know your thoughts. I'll just give you again a minute or so just to decide which ones are most relevant. We do have, another option, which is other. So if you're happy to share in the chat your experience, it might be something completely different to any of the options we've given you. It's maybe something we can talk about before the Q&A. Taking on a new client is definitely
yeah, from speaking to our clients, I'm not surprised that this is a problem. It is a huge thing where, especially where they've not realised that R&DTax release is available to them, but also where they've maybe claimed in the past and assumed they would still be okay, or have been badly advised by previous advisors. So I'm really not surprised that that is the biggest issue for the people on this call.
Okay, I'll end the poll and just share the results for you all to see very quickly. Yeah, so inheriting a previous timeline is
and it's actually interesting to me that of the respondees, at least one has had a previous claim rejected, and that's affected it, because to be honest, I didn't think that would be hugely a huge thing. But if obviously there's one person on this small sample, then obviously that is a bigger issue than we had thought. And so we'll put some thought into how we kind of make sure that people are aware of that as well. Cool. Okay, I think I've got a couple more slides. So having done all that, obviously mitigating against the risks of missing CNFs. So obviously you need robust processes in-house to check if CNFs are needed. So you need to be tracking previous claims. I mean, there's good records of previous claims, when they were submitted, what years they were for, whether they were amendments. So you need to make sure you're maintaining a record of these previous claims so you know whether you need a CNF. Obviously, submitting CNF for every claim as early as possible is really important. So doing it within the window and not leaving it to the last minute in case something goes wrong. But really what we are advising now and what a lot of people in the sector are doing is just automatically submitting a CNF for every claim. So not worrying about, so every time you get a new client, every time a client passes their financial year, into just doing a claim notification form and just knowing that even if they didn't need it, it's in, it's done, and there's no way your claims can be rejected. At the moment, there appear to be no consequences whatsoever for submitting a CNF and then not following that up with an actual claim. HMRC have openly stated that currently there's no issue with that at all. So that's really what we recommend. We didn't at first because it felt like, well, this should be all right. But seeing the number that are missed, seeing the complications, especially with the amendment rule, just putting one in is probably the best advice we can give anyone. As I say, there's no consequences and it stops claims being missed. So absolutely having some process in-house that makes sure that it flags up when a company has got to their year end and submits a claim. You could even do it on the first day of their accounting period if you want to, but something that means that every client that might have any chance of an R&D claim has had a CNF submitted seems to be the best way to manage this at the moment. Obviously, if HMRC change their mind about this and start asking questions about, well, why did you do this and not do a claim, then we'll change our advice. But for now, this seems to be the best way to manage it. And just a quick word on the AIF versus the claim notification form, because I think it's really important to emphasize the difference between the two. As I say, in the early days of this, especially, there's a huge amount of confusion, but I can see from the questions there's still a little bit of a wondering about how they both work. So obviously, if the claim notification form is not mandatory for all claims, we'd advise doing one all the time, but it's not mandatory. The submission deadline is within 6 months of the end of the claim period. So it's a very short window. You've got 6 months to do it after the end of the claim period. And it's a short form, high level summary. It's very quick to do. The additional information form, on the other hand, is required for all claims. The submission is before the CT600 for that claim period is submitted. And obviously then it's got to be within 2 years of the end of the accounting period. So you've got a much longer period in which to do the additional information form, as long as it's done before the CT600 submission. And as everyone, I hope on this call knows, it's a much longer form. It needs detailed project descriptions. It needs details of all the finances. It's a much longer thing. It takes a lot longer to do. So they're very, very different forms even and have very different purposes. The additional information form obviously was introduced to deal with error and fraud by asking for information about claims. The claim notification form is around stopping those claims in their tracks before they're even submitted. So it's a different thing they're aimed at, and there's a hugely different amount of information needed. And it's probably best to think of them as two completely separate parts of the process, because they are separate. There's no crossover information even. So if you fill out a claim notification form, none of that information is then transferred to an AIF, anything like that. They're two completely different systems, completely different forms, done at completely different times. The only thing I should point out with this, obviously, is if you submit the claim within the first 6 months, so before the end of the claim notification deadline, you don't need a claim notification form. So you are okay not to do it if you submit within that window. However, we did have a client who had submitted previous claims nice and early, which pushed them outside of the 3 years from the end of the claim notification period window. And he was quite annoyed that future claims were missed because they'd been efficient 3 years ago. So it's worth just thinking about your timings of everything as well to make sure you maximize your ability to put in future claims. Huge amount to balance and think about within this, but that's where we are with HMRC and R&D claims at the moment. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Suze to talk a wee bit about us again, and then we'll get to the Q&A.
Yeah, just so as we said at the start, our whole being is to help support accountants and advisors who are preparing claims And for example, one of the questions that you get asked very early on in the structured process that you get sent through when you're preparing claim through WhisperClaims is, have you submitted a CNF? Because the very last thing that you want to do is get all the way through the process of preparing a claim with your client, only to find out on submission that a CNF was required and it wasn't submitted. So the way that our software and our process works is just to help identify any risks early on to stop you having to go through that. So if anybody would like to speak to us about having a closer look at our software and hear a bit more about the advice line support that we offer, we do offer a free trial. We'd love to get you in for a chat for a demo. So please do get in touch. For a trial, you get 30 days access to our software and access to us here in the background in terms of our advice and support. You also get a free report download and a free review, claim review, sorry, as part of the trial offering too. And of course, there is no obligation to subscribe if at the end of the trial you find that it is not quite for you, but you certainly get a 360-degree experience of how our offering works. So if anybody would like to get in touch, our contact details will be up on the screen in just a moment, and you can see our book a demo link at the bottom of the page there.
Cool, thanks, Sue. So I think we actually already have several questions, which is nice.
A couple of questions. I will jump in first of all. So I think before we answer some of them, but it might maybe worth reiterating. Guys, I'm really sorry. I don't want to keep you, and we've got this terrible transmission. So let's just say we'll call it a day for today. I promise we will answer all of the questions in the follow-up. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today. And we really look forward to hopefully welcoming you to our next session where we will do our best to make sure that we don't have any technical glitches. Appreciate your time. If anybody's got any questions outside of today, please do feel free to drop us a message. We'll be really delighted to help you out. And as I said, if anybody wants to have a chat to us about the software and support that we can provide you as a firm, do feel free to get in touch for a demo, just a quick chat. As I said, no obligation, but the free trial is a great way to be able to experience what WhisperClaim can offer you and help you out with some of the risk mitigation issues that can come along with preparing claims. But we'll give you back some of your day this Wednesday, and we'll be in touch very, very soon, as I said, with a follow-up. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for your patience. Speak soon. Thanks, Gemma. Take care. Bye bye.